Isolation as AU suspends country's membership, warns of interference by non-African states. How practical is a military solution in Niger? Also on the program, BRICS leaders announce expansion amidst 6 more countries. This is Africa Update on Trust TV, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Ayuba Ilya. Thanks for joining. The African Union has directed its member countries to avoid any action that might legitimize the military junta in Niger after it barred the country from participating from the organization's activities, while warning against interference in Niger by non-African countries and entities, including private military companies. The continental body said it was considering activating its standby force and sending troops to Niger. This is coming weeks after the sub-regional body ECOWAS said it is ready to deploy whatever means necessary, including the use of force to restore democratic rule in the country. ECOWAS Chief of Defense Staff, after a meeting in Accra, Ghana, had said that except for countries under military rule and Cape Verde, troops from the sub-region have pledged readiness to deploy its standby force that could restore civil rule in Niger Republic should diplomatic efforts to reverse the coup fail. Many have doubted whether there's any ECOWAS standby force that could be deployed for such a mission in Niger. So, earlier I asked General Martin Luther Agwai, who was former commander of the 20,000 troops UN-AU peacekeeping force in Darfur, and here's what he had to say.
The standby force is not that there is a force that ECOWAS as an organization has a force standing by. No. The standby force is a force that member countries have pledged. It's based on the pledges by member countries that when they are required, they will be assembled. They will be assembled. For example, Nigeria as a country must have pledged, let's assume, I'm not sure, I'm just giving an example. Nigeria might have said they are going to put a division or a battalion or a brigade as a standby force. If ECOWAS one and there is a need, they will now dedicate that brigade, that battalion, or that force, let's say force, to the ECOWAS. And Ghana must have done her own pledges. Cote d'Ivoire must have done their own. When Niger was fully in ECOWAS, they must have done their own. And before the suspension of Mali and Guinea, they must have done their own pledges. Senegal, Gambia, all the member states of ECOWAS must have made a pledge. It is that pledge force that is called the standby force for ECOWAS. Nobody will force you, but you have on your own voluntarily accept to do that. So if there is a division and people are not willing to go, it could be then the operation could be conducted by the willing forces. If there are those countries that are willing to go and accept that they're willing to do it, then the ECOWAS can still operate under the umbrella of ECOWAS and under the mandate of ECOWAS. So it does not necessarily mean that the whole countries in ECOWAS, I think there are 15 or 16, that all of them must sign on to and give troops. No. Some may sign on and say we have no troops to give. And if ECOWAS still in her own estimation and her own consideration and everything believe that what they have, pledges they have already on the ground, is strong enough for her to do that, then she could still go ahead to do it. ECOWAS has other means of raising funds. And there are members of ECOWAS who could say, well, we are donating money, but we are not going to donate our troops and we are not going to honor our pledge of troops. But we will contribute to the logistic and the logistic resources required for the operation. So There are so many ways ECOWAS can get money. There are other organizations like the AU, the UN, the EU, and other prominent countries. If they believe in the cause of ECOWAS, they can contribute to ECOWAS to contribute that. But I think war is not a tea party. I'm sure that, yes, before ECOWAS will ever think of launching any troops into battle, I'm sure, like I said in that Arise program, they have to think across the whole spectrum.
This, I have in the studio Professor Usman Mohammed, CEO, Center for Legislative Studies in Africa. Thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update, Prof.
Thank you.
Well, let me begin by asking, is Niger at the risk of isolation, given the recent suspension of the country from the African Union?
Yes, truly. Not only at the risk, but the impact has started in Niger, and it's abhorring when you visit the country now. The economy is collapsing, though the people have some resilience on it, but then the closure of the border and the embargo put by ECOWAS has a real impact. It has real impact in Niger. Soon after the announcement, we noticed tons and tons of goods and services that are awaiting at the borderlines between Nigeria and Niger, and also the other countries at the borderline of Niger. There has not been so many commercial activities in Niger, and this has made serious impact. And besides that, the electricity cut, that's the energy that has been cut against Niger Junta's government, has its own impact as well.
Okay, now some have said, well, it's good enough that the military junta in Niger is opting for dialogue, and have decided that they are going to be meeting with ECOWAS delegation. However, they have said that they are going to be in for 3 years before transition to a civilian government. Do you think that the dialogue may not yield any results, given that the military junta is already coming to the table of dialogue with its own terms?
Well, nobody had asked the junta to produce any timetable for return to democracy in Niger. They have not entered into any negotiation. What we have seen is a self-styled military rule that, if you know, in the 60s and 70s, when the militaries have been striking all over in different parts of Africa, when they come in with different excuses, they now say, look, listen, we have a timetable to return the country back to normalcy or democratic regime. And here is our timetable. And that is exactly what the junta have done, though under pressure to relinquish power. This time around, not pressure to sit down and come up with timetable that will be agreed by the ECOWAS. There has never been an intervention that has made the military so scary like this. They are the ones offering to go after some time. Though they are recalcitrant, they have insisted on their own terms. And that is where they have problems with the ECOWAS, whereby the ECOWAS have demand for immediate restoration of power back to the civilian President Bazoum. So this is the first time we are seeing this, and ECOWAS have kicked against that timetable already. They are not accepting that timetable, ECOWAS have insisted that they have their options if that is not done. That is to say, if the return back to civilian presidential system in Niger is not done, they will definitely have to intervene by force. So they said that all options are on the table. They haven't started negotiating, although it's a good thing that, that the military have shifted grounds on the fact that, okay, we can now negotiate, but here is our timetable. But nobody asked them about timetable to return to civilian regime.
Now, how practical is a military solution in Niger, given that the military junta seem to have this public support, in the country?
Well, in some instances, the report is the fact that it is the military themselves that have instigated the protest in their own favor. It wasn't voluntary. It wasn't as such what people think it is. On the other hand, some reports have it that yes, there are people that support them because of the long-term exploitation of France against the Francophone-speaking countries, especially Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and other countries. Those countries have stayed under excruciating exploitation and concomitant transfer of their money, their resources to the Western capital world. And especially France have imposed serious economic exploitation against those countries. So against that backdrop, there has been the need for average African, Francophone countries, citizens to say, hey, look, we are tired of this exploitation because our resources have lightened up the towers in Paris. It has lightened up these countries. It has made them great powers. The uranium and other resources that we have in Niger is being exploited by these big, powerful states, while the Nigerian people, the people of Niger, have not seen any meaningful transformation for over half a century. So I think this is a turn of events.
Okay. Well, we know that before now there was ECOMOG in place, and that's the kind of a military arm of the ECOWAS, but that it's no more, if I'm right. Is ECOWAS standby force real, really? People have been asking the question since the ECOWAS made the pronouncement that they are going to be opting for military intervention.
Well, Ayuba, I always ask, where is the standby force? That's the issue. When you talk about ECOWAS standby force, where is the standby force? There is contradiction here. Here is a country that had, West Africa had woken up all of a sudden with a military coup. And then here is the threat by ECOWAS, by the chairman of ECOWAS. And now they became so desperate to form a military command to go to Niger. If the ECOWAS standby force is functional, we wouldn't be looking for all the chief of staffs of these countries to come and meet and then draw up agenda, bring logistics, bring personnel and armory to go to Niger. So I think that it's premature to say that ECOWAS have any standby force. Where is the standby force? Where is it? It's just by name.
Okay, so some experts like General Martin Luther Aguai has said that, well, by virtue of the treaties signed by member countries of ECOWAS, they are obligated to contribute troops in times of need, and that's what the ECOWAS is considering as the standby force. So in that respect, if you also recall, you would see that back in Gambia, there was this time when Yahya Jammeh wanted to hold on to power after an election. We saw the involvement of ECOWAS at the time and how there was the threat to also use the military in that country, and that yielded and forced out Yahya Jammeh at the time. So isn't that, a framework that is, practical in this?
Well, you talk about the charter, and the charter says contributing forces. And these are forces that must be contributed. Even the ECOMOG were forces that were contributed from different West African countries to move to Liberia. And they had their challenges. Through Cote d'Ivoire, the head of state at that time refused for any ECOMOG force to use his land to go to Liberia, if you remember. And they had challenges. Not all the countries made the contribution. And so if the charter says that these countries will come up with a formula and a force to be reckoned with, contribution, and go into any state that is either about to fall or has witnessed this type of coup in Niger, that means it's not a standby force, it's contributory. And it's voluntary also. So some other states might look at their economic pulse, their strength and weaknesses. They may look at their pulse and say they may not be able to contribute. But that is no offense. It's obligatory. Thirdly, which is the last part, is the fact that even when you contribute forces, even if you are strong, there have to be some rules of engagement. There has to be some other protocol before you move in. Lastly, you talk about Gambia. Gambia's effort was solely by Nigeria. Nigeria was the sole country that went into Gambia and did what they did with their air force and with their army and negotiation team. And Yahya Jammeh gave in because he knew Nigeria was real. And such a tiny country could not stand the force of Nigeria. So there is nothing like contributory force, even in the case of Gambia.
Even though it was under the auspices of the ECOWAS that Nigeria intervened at that time, I recall.
Nigeria is ECOWAS and ECOWAS is Nigeria.
Well, that also comes to the issue of funding for this operation or mission in Niger, if need be. If the ECOWAS decide that they are going for a military intervention, who will be funding such operation? And
70% of the funding, let me be modest, 75% of the funding will be the burden of Nigeria. And right now, Nigeria has serious crisis in the energy sector. Nigeria has serious crisis in the agricultural security. The population is not well fed. The economic crisis is there. And also, revenue is being generated by the removal of subsidy. So I don't think it will be wise for Nigeria to carry the burden. We might have carried the burden in the past on ECOMOG, but it will not be a wisdom. It will never be wise for us to go and fight in Niger, whereby we'll spend almost 70 or 100% of the logistics, of the boots on the ground, and then the equipment. And by the end of the day, France will take the glory. It's as simple as that. So if the French or if France need Nigeria to intervene and go into Niger, let France start first. We cannot be used as cannon folders. We are more than pounds. Nigeria is Niger, and Niger is Nigeria. And there is no how the war will not affect the entire part of the north. Some are saying 7 states, 6 states, 5 states. It's the entire northern state. And the crisis of the refugees that will be the spillover of this crisis, of this conflict, will be unimaginable in the part of the states that are contagious to Maradi and other parts of Niger. So let's be wise, let diplomacy take place. Let us have, to use seasoned diplomats in this country. We have them.
So some Nigerians have also queried, some of this big brother role that Nigeria has assumed in the past, saying, well, what are the benefits to Nigeria? Are there any benefits really to, that posture or that foreign policy of Nigeria, whereby it intervenes in countries, around it?
Well, Nigeria had never gone to war with any country since after the speech of Tafawa Balewa in the August Assembly of the United Nations, Nigeria as the 99th member of that United Nations, Sir Tafawa Balewa of blessed memory said that we will maintain peaceful relationship with our brothers in Africa. We had never gone to war. We had always intervened, and Nigeria has an impeccable record of peacekeeping around the globe. All we need to do is to consolidate on such records and never to spoil such records, to go out and fight war that is not even in our own benefit.
Yeah, so in these interventions, exactly, I'm talking about, it has cost the country billions and even lives of, Nigerian troops. What's the gain?
Well, the United Nations always rely on stronger regional countries to intervene. And in most cases, these interventions have brought about peace around the world. Imagine if there hadn't been any emergency meeting in Banjul at that time during the regime of Babangida, who went and gathered the heads of states and government and intervened in Liberia. Liberia will have been no more. Sierra Leone will have been no more. So the intervention has stabilized the states. And stabilizing these states in West Africa brought about strong unity, strong coordination, strong solidarity. Although most of these countries that are under the purview and supervision of France have never wanted us to have that strong role. So we should never, ever imagine that France needs Nigeria. Since before the Civil War, after the Civil War, till tomorrow, France had never wanted Nigeria to be in unity. And any opportunity like this, France will jump at it and see that Nigeria itself will never live in peace with its own neighbors. So let us live in our neighbors. You are talking about the benefit of intervention in peace missions. We did under the United Nations peacekeeping forces. So the United Nations peacekeeping forces and the Charter of the United States have encouraged regional cooperation and regional intervention. And also, when you, as a country and a member of that world body, you move into peace mission, the first thing that comes under finance, logistics, and whatever is still under the purview of the United Nations. Okay. Certainly not Nigeria. So the benefit has been tremendous.
Okay. Now, talking about the United Nations, there are those who also argue that ECOWAS cannot outrightly, opt for military intervention in Niger without the approval of the United Nations Security Council. What's your take?
Well, in the Charter of the United Nations and in the subsequent operations in the world, it has always encouraged regional peacekeeping. And as such, this is not an exception, except to the fact that a big power like France wants to hold tenaciously those satellite states today that have turned back against France. Mali have had a coup. Burkina Faso have had a coup of recent. Guinea-Conakry, Chad, now Niger, about 5 states. And you never know where this bushfire effect of military intervention will stop. So now France have seen that their erstwhile colonies are seriously revolting against them for their own atrocities. And so Macron himself went to United Nations and apologized. And he saw that really it has been another issue entirely in the world of these countries that they have practically made slaves. Today, they are regaining back their freedom and they are in unity and not democratic. And nobody wants military regime, except, of course, in this type of circumstances. But then the erstwhile countries, the big powers, are in unison not to relax their rules since after independence of these countries. So I think that there is a serious uprising against France. And France have realized it, and they must do. Even when they quieten the storm, they must have to come and sit down. It's not just apology by mouth. Reparations have to be there. A lot of other issues to develop these countries to a level where the citizens will not be taking flight into the Atlantic Ocean to perish, and also they look at their political issues together with their economic rights, so that these countries will breathe.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Professor Usman Mohammed, CEO, Center for Legislative Studies in Africa. Indeed, we look forward to seeing these countries breathe.
You are welcome,
like our president will say.
You are welcome.
Thank you. You're watching Africa Update on Trust TV. After the break, BRICS leaders announce expansion amidst 6 more countries. Details and more shortly. Welcome back. This is Africa Update on Trust TV, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. The BRICS group of nations have decided to invite 6 countries, namely Argentina, Egypt, Iran, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, to become new members of the bloc, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced. The debate over expanding the BRICS bloc, comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has topped the agenda at a 3-day summit in Johannesburg. While all BRICS members have publicly expressed support for growing the bloc, there were divisions among the leaders over how much and how quickly. Take a look.
We have consensus on the first phase of this expansion process, and other phases will follow. We have decided to invite the Argentine Republic, the Arab Republic of Egypt, the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates to become full members of BRICS. The membership will take effect from the 1st of January 2024.
Well, that's a wrap on Africa Update for this week. You can join us next week for another time on the program. You can always watch across all our social media platforms and also